Welcome to MMAfighting.com's UFC 130 preview show in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm Ariel Helwani, joined as always by Mike Chiappetta. And this time, Mike, we have brought a third member, longtime member of MMAfighting.com, Mr. Matt Erickson. Matt, let's ignore Mike here for a second and welcome you for the first time doing a preview show. How do you feel?
I feel good. I don't know what to do with my hands, but we'll figure it out as we go.
Now, Mike, any truth to the rumor, Mike, that you felt like you couldn't really do this on your own, so you had to bring Matt? Or are you upset that Matt's here stealing some of the thunder from you?
Have you already forgotten the conversation we had where I said, hey, why don't we invite Matt into this?
Such a team player, this guy.
I'm taking all credit of bringing Matt in. So he's got a lot to live up to here. We'll see how he does.
All right, guys. UFC 130 goes down this Saturday night from the MGM Grand Garden Arena here in Las Vegas. And Mike, we'll start with you. Rampage Jackson, you know, all the talk going into this fight was about his demeanor, about whether or not he was really excited for this fight, about whether or not Matt Hamill could really bring the best out of Rampage. And I got to be honest, last couple of days that we've seen him, he's in a great mood. You know, he's very good with the media. He seems to be in a good place, looking good. Weight cut seems to be good. Are you surprised by just how, you know, at ease he is with everything?
It seems like it's a 180 from where he was. You know, we were at his last fight when he fought Machida in Detroit, and he seemed like he was a little stressed out or anxious or whatever it may be. I think there was other things going on with him maybe at that time, and he was, you know, you could see the sort of stress level. Maybe he just wasn't enjoying the media that week. I don't know. But this time around, he seems like he's having a lot more fun. You know, he's got a lot of people around him that he's friends with, and he's loose, he's joking around. And to me, I think that's probably when he's going to be at his best, because like he said, he doesn't really get super excited about fights anymore. He's been doing this for a long time. He likened it today to, you know, does a teacher get excited to go to school? No, this is my job. This is what I do. When I get to the cage, that's when things click in. But being in a good frame of mind during event week is only going to help him, because there's not going to be any extra stress or any bad, you know, vibes around him.
We'll have Matt play the Rampage camp. Mike, you'll play the Hamill camp, and you'll understand what I'm referring to. If you're Rampage Jackson and you're fighting Matt Hamill, this great wrestler and a guy who has improved as of late, how do you beat him?
Hope to God that Matt doesn't take you down, I think is what Rampage needs to be thinking about. He's a good wrestler. Rampage is not a bad wrestler. He's a good defensive wrestler, but as he's mentioned, he's gotten away from that. He's become a stand-up fighter the last few years. Matt seems to know that. And I think Matt thinks that as long as he can take him down, this could be his fight to win.
And I think most would agree with that. And I think that a lot of people might say that once upon a time, Rampage was a very good wrestler who went to his wrestling more. He's gone away from that, as Matt alluded to. If you're Matt Hamill and your strength is wrestling, knowing Rampage and the fact that he has to respect the fact that he has underrated takedown defense, how are you going to beat this guy who is so much better than you on the feet?
Well, I think fighters don't really think that way. I believe when they go into camp and they start breaking down their opponent, looking at film, they find certain areas where they think that person is vulnerable. So even if he thinks Rampage is a better striker than him overall, there might be certain parts of the striking game where he thinks he can find Rampage's chin, or, you know, he can set him up a certain way to land punches and stay away from Rampage's power, which, you know, that's half the battle. I mean, if you can land and get away from his power shots, you can win the fight. Mix in a few takedowns, maybe push him against the fence a little bit. You know, Rampage, you know, he always talks about how much he gets out of shape in between fights. Put him against the fence, question his cardio, you know, see how he does. You know, if you put him in those situations where he's got to exert a lot of energy, and is he going to tire out? You know, once his fight gets into a third round, if it's close, you know, maybe that's the area where Matt can look to take the fight over. But, you know, he's got enough skills to where he can make this a real contest.
Yesterday at the press conference, Matt, Rampage Jackson said that, you know, he was a little disappointed that he gained so much weight when the UFC called and asked him to fight Shogun Rua. He kind of regrets that, and that kind of changed things for him, and he's going to try to be in better shape between fights. Right now, when you consider the fact that Dana said on Wednesday that Rashad Evans, even if he beats Phil Davis, isn't going to get you know, the next shot at John Jones, and you consider the fact that you look at the rest of the light heavyweight division, it kind of makes sense that Rampage Jackson, if he wins and looks good, would be the next man in line. Do you feel as though that maybe has motivated him a little more, knowing that if he wins this fight, he will maybe get a shot at the title?
It's funny because he's played both sides of the fence in saying, yes, I regret gaining weight because of the Shogun situation. I've also heard him say, I don't regret it. It is what it is. That's how I get in the off season, and I wouldn't change that at all. I think there's a new Rampage now. I don't think he's going to balloon up, as he says, after this fight. I think he's going to know that he has to always be ready to get that call.
Who's your pick and why?
I think Rampage wins the fight. He looks good. He looks a lot more relaxed this time around. I think his power is there. I think he's motivated. I think that's the reason. Motivation, key.
Do you agree, Mike?
Yeah, I do. Well, I think Matt Hamill's got enough skills to possibly pull an upset here. I think people are forgetting how great of a fighter Rampage is. You know, there seems to be sort of a sentiment towards Matt Hamill in this fight. Obviously, the guy's got a great story, and if he wins this match, it's going to do wonders for his career. It's going to establish him as a contender. I mean, and it's just a great storyline to someone, you know, a deaf fighter who's going to the level of, you know, being a championship contender possibly. Rampage is a championship level fighter. I mean, he's, I think, 9-2 over his last 11 fights. You know, he's lost, you know, to Rashad Evans in a close fight. His other, I don't even remember what his other loss is off the top of my head, but
Forrest Griffin.
Forrest Griffin, there you go. And it was a very close
Title.
disputed fight. Very close disputed fight. So he's a very tough guy to beat. Even when this guy doesn't come in 100% to the start of his camp, he finds a way to get into shape. He's always got that knockout power. He's very aggressive, which always plays into the judges' eyes. When you're an aggressive guy, you're coming forward, the judges like that. So I think he's got a lot of things that can pull the fight in his favor. Good enough wrestling to stop the takedowns as well.
The co-main event features a heavyweight bout between Frank Mir and Roy Nelson. And Matt, I find this fight so difficult to predict because, you know, both of the guys, you know, we know about their relationship, but I just feel as though their skills kind of, in a sense, mirror each other. And yes, you know, Frank Mir, probably the better jiu-jitsu practitioner, but, you know, Roy Nelson, very good on the ground as well. He doesn't go to it as often. What do you think is the key here for Roy Nelson? Where does he need to keep this fight?
I think he needs to keep it standing. Frank is better on the ground. I think Roy believes that as well. Frank told me yesterday he's trained a lot off of his back for this fight, anticipating that if the fight does go to the ground, Roy could lay on top of him and hold him down. Frank believes he's stronger now. He talked to me yesterday about being vegan for a full year, and he's gone off of that now. He's back on lean meats and says he feels a lot better, a lot stronger. So I think if this fight goes to the ground, I think that's where he's definitely got the edge.
It's a very interesting fight for Frank Mir because he's coming off a knockout win. And, you know, usually when a guy comes off a knockout win against a legend like Mirko Cro Cop, you got some momentum. It doesn't feel as though he has that kind of momentum going into this fight. What does this fight mean for the heavyweight division?
The whole division? That's kind of difficult to say. I mean, it's a division in a little bit of flux with Brock Lesnar being out. You know, there's obviously been some turmoil with some matchups. Frank Mir's been a contender for a long time. When he hasn't been the champion, he's been a contender, and I don't think that's going to be any different if he wins this fight. I mean, he needs to win the fight. I mean, obviously people were not happy with his last fight. Even he wasn't happy with his last fight. Dana White wasn't. Joe Silva wasn't. There was a lot of unsatisfied people with a knockout win, as you said. So this is a fight he needs to win, and he needs to put forth a good effort. And Roy Nelson is a guy that is very hard to finish. He's a guy that makes other good fighters look bad. So it's going to be a tall order for Frank to really win this in a really impressive way. Even though he may win, you know, will we see him finish Roy? Roy's a hard guy to finish.
Will he pull it off?
I think Frank will pull it off, but I think we'll go all 3 rounds. I think Frank is a better striker. I don't know if I agree with you guys that Frank is better off the ground. I think we just see him more on the ground. Right. So that's sort of the impression people get when they had grappling matches in the past. I mean, Roy won one of them, so he's very capable of grappler. But I think Frank being a southpaw is something that's being undervalued in this fight. It's a hard thing to prepare for. And, you know, we asked Roy before this, did he bring southpaws into his camp to prepare? And, you know, he said a couple, but it really wasn't a big focus for him, and that may end up being a mistake.
Do you agree, Matt?
I think Frank wins this fight.
Too much agreeing going on here.
Not doing it intentionally. Frank believes that this is the best Frank Mir that has ever been out there, and fighters say that every time. We hear it all the time. When he said that yesterday, he had this little glimmer in his eye that you actually kind of believed him. And he talked to me a little bit about when he gets pushed up against the fence, he used to take a jiu-jitsu mentality and not push back. And now he wants to push back. And he said if he gets pushed against the fence, it's going to the ground. I think he wins this fight.
Mike, a very interesting fight between George Santiago and Brian Stann. Santiago, member of the UFC several years ago, leaves, gets released, does great things over in Japan, Strikeforce, and now he's back, has only lost once since leaving the UFC. 11 times he has won. Right now, considering what Brian Stann has done in his last couple fights, looked very good a couple months ago against Chris Lieben. Is he ready to face a fighter like George Santiago?
I think he is ready. I mean, just from the fact that he beat up Chris Lieben, I mean, that says a lot. Chris Lieben is a very seasoned, very experienced fighter. If you're able to beat him in such a decisive way, I think you're ready for anyone. And to me, I think this is the most interesting, intriguing fight on this card. I mean, with all due respect to the other fights on this card, I think it's a really interesting one. You have, Santiago, who's kind of washed out in the UFC his first time around, went on this incredible run outside of the UFC, and he feels he's got a lot to prove here. To him, it's not, it's almost like he's reestablishing himself, even though he's been on a tremendous tear. And Stan, he really feels like he's put everything together. He's talked about, everything sort of clicking for him, everything making sense. He's at the right weight. He feels comfortable with his striking, his ground game, his wrestling has improved. So he feels everything's come together. To me, this is kind of two guys that are at the top of their game at the same time, and that's always the most interesting fight to me.
A lot of pundits, Matt, think that George Santiago is one of the 10 best middleweights in the world. Great on the ground, has power as well. Can't stand if this fight goes to the ground. A lot of people think Santiago wants this fight to go to the ground, especially considering the fact that Stan, known to be a striker and hasn't fared very, very well on the ground. Can't Stan hang with Santiago if the fight goes to the ground? I'm
not sure that he can. I think that's where he could get into a little bit of trouble. Being able to keep it on the feet obviously is key for him. My biggest question about Santiago is, even though he's been in the UFC before, will there be sort of those first-time back jitters? It's been a while. It's a little bit different UFC landscape now than it was the first time that he was here. He hasn't fought in the United States, and I don't think since he left. Will those things play a factor? He says that he doesn't believe that they will. They might,
Your pick?
My pick is Brian Stann.
After all that,
Sorry,
Mike, your pick?
I'll go with Santiago this time.
I like it.
I think it's a really hard fight to pick. I think they're both two really talented guys. This is one of the fights where their skill sets may, not necessarily offset. There's one guy's better in one spot, one guy's better in the other. Whoever gets it to where they want, could win this fight. But to me, I feel like Santiago is a little bit more well-rounded, and maybe that will be the difference maker, although Stan's power, certainly has the ability to end this fight with one punch.
Right. Okay, let's go rapid fire. Last few fights, some interesting ones as well. Thiago Alves, Rick Story, a great 170-pound fight. Who are you picking?
My pick is Thiago Alves.
Mike?
Tough fight to pick. I love watching Story fight, a very game fighter, but I'll pick Alves as well. I think he's a little more seasoned, and it's hard to know whether Story is ready for this bump up.
An important heavyweight fight, especially for Stefan Struve. He's on the cusp of really making a lot of noise. He's facing Travis Brown. Who are you picking?
I'm going to go with Travis Brown, who is the favorite in this fight, which I was a little surprised about. Struve is a little more...
is he really?
He is the favorite, yeah.
Betting favorite?
Yes, he is. I'm surprised to see that, since Struve has more experience in the octagon. But to me, I look at Travis Brown, I think he looks pretty well-rounded. He looks to me to be a rugged fighter, too. If this fight gets real physical, I think this type of fight that will suit him. So that's why I'm picking Brown. But Struve, very capable fighter.
Do you agree, Matt?
Stefan Struve.
Really? All right, there you go. Also, another interesting fight on the Spike TV prelims, a guy that you know a lot about, Miguel Torres facing Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. Can Torres pull it off?
I think so. And when the opponent change happened for Torres, I was one of the first people to say this is a dangerous fight for him. His weakest spot has always been his wrestling, and that's where we know Demetrius excels. We saw him take down Kid Yamamoto 10 times. Miguel has been working his wrestling nonstop, really since his last loss. So the question is will he be able to keep range enough to keep Johnson from taking him down? I think he will be able to.
Do you agree, Mike?
I thought Torres had a great line. He said, "How do you stop Mighty Mouse? How do you stop a mouse? You set a trap." I don't know if he'll be able to set that trap. I think Johnson the speed is one of the most difficult things to prepare for, and one of the most difficult things to fight against, because it's hard to replicate in practice. There's not that many guys who have that type of speed. And I think that's going to be a huge weapon for Johnson. Throwing the takedowns, I think this is a prime one for the upset, and so I'm picking Johnson.
Wow, okay. And final one that we'll touch on, Kendall Grove, Tim Boach. Who are you picking?
I'm going to go with Boch. I think Grove has had some problems with some real strong strapping guys, and Boch is really that kind of guy who's, hey, he's the barbarian. I mean, he's that type of fighter where he's going to make it a physical grind, and Grove has had some trouble with that kind of guy. So I'm picking Boch.
Boch dropping down to 185. How will he do in his debut?
I think Kendall Grove pulls this one off, and really he has to. He's been up and down. I think he has so much potential. He just can't really seem to string anything together for the last 2 years in terms of a winning streak. I think he's got to do it.
All right, well, on top of all of those fights, 3 fights live and free on Facebook as well. A loaded night of fights from the UFC. It's UFC 130. It all kicks off 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Don't forget about the new start time. And 8 p.m., the Spike TV fights start over on Spike, of course. Mike Chiappetta, Matt Erickson, Ariel Helwani saying so long from Las Vegas.